think we can start. Just a few words, because I've said that all week long, so the last time for this week. So I'm René Garello from OBPS, and I'm one of the colleagues. So that session is on Challenge 9, which is skills, knowledge, and technology for all. And we have two co-chairs, Edem, Mahu from Ghana, and so Talen Rimmer. Yes, he's here. Sorry, Edem will present you because I don't exactly know. So again, and forget me if you have been listening to me many times. The workshop was set up in order to, at the same time, have a look at all the 10 challenges, possibly from the UN Ocean Decade, some of the endorsed programs associated in terms of what they do, and in terms of the relationship with best practices, which is a topic of the workshop, and having the presentation and discussion going all together. And so this is for this week. That's the last session of the workshop part. Next week we will have the focus session that was in a previous session that Pauline put the link in the chat, but you must have received it many times, and Jose will send it again and again, so no excuses not to attend. So Edem, it's up to you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, René. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. On behalf of the Ocean Best Practices team, systems team, I welcome you all to this afternoon's webinar focused on best practices for Ocean Decade Challenge 9 on skills, technology, and knowledge for all. My name is Edem Mahu, and I am a marine biogeochemist at the University of Ghana. I also co-chair the United Nations Ocean Decade Vision 2030 Working Group 9 on Challenge 9 with Professor Brian Arbeck. Just a little background about the Vision 2030 process. This is a working group, a number of working groups that has been set up by the Ocean Decade on each of the challenges. And for Challenge 9, we have the Working Group 9 among the other 10 working groups tasked by the decade. And the goal is to set up a comprehensive and visionary strategic ambition that determines user needs, priority data sets, residual knowledge gaps in science, as well as scientific knowledge and resources or infrastructure, partnership, capacity development, technology solutions, and infrastructure that is required for the challenge that we are working on and we are currently discussing, which is Challenge 9. The ultimate output is a white paper that outlines the strategic ambition for this challenge for the next 10 years. With me to co-chair this session is Talen Rimmer. Talen, could you please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a bit about the IOC's role in capacity development before I come back to introduce our panelists. Over to you, Talen.
For sure, thank you, Edem. Hi, everyone. As was mentioned, my name is Talen Rimmer. My role largely with Ocean Best Practices System is I'm an early career ambassador for OBPS. Thanks so much for having me here today. As you mentioned, Carol unfortunately couldn't make it today, so I'm just stepping in to co-chair. What my role largely outside of my work outside of being an ambassador with OBPS is I am a graduate student at the University of Victoria, all the way on the west coast of North America. So it is indeed morning here. And I am working with a suite of researchers here to figure out how artificial intelligence compares to things like ROV and dive surveys when trying to monitor pelagic biodiversity for nearshore systems here. So I'm heavily excited for this challenge and this session today. And thanks again for joining all of us. With regards to IOC and UNESCO's strategy and how that plays in today, I just have a note here that says, just wants to, I guess, emphasize the importance of today's session as a kind of informative process, right? And that UNESCO has this capacity development strategy that is approved for implementation with all member nations. So there's this emphasis and onus on member nations, like we're doing here today, to engage with sharing best practices related to ocean observing, relating to skills, knowledge, and technology for all. And so that leads us to, after we have these talks, which you're going to hear today from some of our wonderful presenters, we're all going to be encouraged to have a session where we ask some questions, and hopefully you folks can provide some input using a Jamboard or speaking up or writing in the chat. And then hopefully we're going to distill and record all that information so that afterwards we can provide some written feedback and a record of our session here today and the engagement that will happen. Okay, so just a couple notes on that. And I'll hand it back to you, Edem.
Thank you very much, Talen. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot talk about the science we need for the ocean we want without talking about what capacity we need, what already exists, and how we can approach capacity development and capacity sharing. There always remains a big gap in science when capacity is inequitably distributed, particularly between the global north and the global south. Capacity remains a cross-cutting need that runs through all the other 9 challenges set up by the decade. And that is why we have this challenge 9 that has been set up to ensure comprehensive capacity development and equitable access to data, information, knowledge, and technology across all aspects of ocean science for all stakeholders, regardless of geography, gender, culture, and age. We are therefore delighted to be joined in this panel by 3 experts working on diverse areas of capacity development and strengthening, who will be helping us identify best practices needed to tackle this challenge. Our first panelist is Cassandra Hartery. Pardon me if I don't get the name right. The role of, she will be giving us a talk on the role of the Ocean Tracking Network's Equipment Loaner Program in addressing challenges for collective impact under the UN Ocean Decade. Cassandra is the Field Operations and Project Coordinator for the Ocean Tracking Network. And the Ocean Tracking Network is a global aquatic research, data management, and partnership platform headquartered at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova. I'm sure Cassandra will tell us a bit more about her organization. One question I have for you after your presentation is whether there are any existing best practices for capacity sharing that you are aware of, or that the OTN has leveraged in its equipment loaner program. Thank you very much, and over to you, Cassandra.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to start here by sharing my screen, and we will start the presentation. From the beginning. Oh, it's taking a second there. Is everybody able to see that?
Nope, not yet. At least not me. I see your background for the screen. It's a nice
very
whale there.
lovely whale on your desktop.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Well, let's try this
You
again.
need to choose the screen that is.
How's that?
This one. Good.
Good?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, now
Okay,
we can see it. Thanks.
And oh shoot, I am missing the notes. Sorry, one moment. We just did this. Can I switch into a, oh, Sorry, everybody. We just went through this and it was functioning fine. Let's try this a second time.
In the meantime, when you present, when you share your screen, there is in between each slide, when you click for the next one, there is a slight delay that in our world of immediately actions seems very long, but it's 1 second. No.
How does that look?
Looks like your screen.
The proper screen does look like the presentation?
No, your presentation, because I see the sharks.
Okay, and it says Ocean Best Practices Workshop, UN Ocean Decade Challenge 9. We're ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that, everybody. So thank you for having OTN here to speak on behalf of the Challenge 9 Skills, Knowledge and Technology for All. We're going to give an overview of the Ocean Tracking Network, what we do, and our equipment loaner program, and how that supports a global network of researchers. So just a little bit about the Ocean Tracking Network. To distill it down, OTN is an international aquatic tracking platform. We are connecting researchers to determine where their animals are going. We were launched in 2008, and we are now one of the 17 Canadian national research facilities, a part of the major science initiatives, and we are funded by the Canadian Foundation for Innovation. We use global technology and research infrastructure to be able to leverage a scientific network and partnerships throughout the world. We use biological observations, which includes electronic telemetry systems, documenting movements and survival of marine species and their link to environmental conditions, primarily acoustic telemetry, but also satellite tags, data loggers, pit tags. That's only in development for data right now, but we're working on it. So our mission and vision. By providing knowledge of the movements of aquatic animals, we're able to inform on their sustainable management, habitats, and survival facing changing global environments. We are working towards the goal of sustainable management and the use of ocean resources, engaging and informing stakeholders and sharing resources, our abilities, and data. So how exactly does this work into the UN Ocean Decade? UNESCO endorsed 9 projects that were a part of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainability program. There was a Marine Life 2030 program, which 6 of those projects fell under, and one of those projects is the Ocean Tracking Network. Although we're here talking about Challenge 9 today with skills, knowledge, and technology for all, 2 other main challenges that we try to address are Challenge 2 to protect and restore ecosystems and biodiversity, as well as Challenge 7 to expand the global ocean observing system. So what is so important about tracking? What can tracking help inform? Aquatic animals are highly important for a number of reasons, such as food security, cultural significance, and ecosystem health. Knowing where marine animals go can help fill knowledge gaps for a variety of purposes, like fisheries management, the design of marine protected areas, impact assessments, endangered species interactions, environmental conditions, habitat assessment, among many other concepts. So how exactly does tracking work? We're going to focus on the 2 predominant technologies that you need to be able to do acoustic tracking. So many people are familiar with satellite tagging, but this requires an animal that breaches or surfaces. Acoustic technology is used for anything that happens below the surface. So when we say tracking, we're talking about the scientific discipline of acoustic telemetry. This is the use of acoustic technology to track animals underwater using sound. This works really well because sound travels 4 times faster in the water than in air, which makes it easier to transmit information. We can't see the animals underwater, but we can hear them much better than what we can on land. So we're going to talk about acoustic tags, which are small transmitters. And then we're also going to talk about acoustic receivers. So in this sweet little diagram, we have an example of a lobster that would have an acoustic tag attached to it. And then the secondary part would be either an acoustic receiver that could be on a boat or moored to the seafloor. So we use acoustic receivers to record animal movement. Now that we have tags that are pinging in the ocean, we need equipment to be able to listen to the tags. These are called acoustic receivers. They are stationary moorings in the ocean, which listen for those specific ping codes of acoustic tags, which record an ID for a specific individual tagged animal, along with the date and time that it was heard. And then using this information and knowledge about where the receiver was deployed and which animal the tag was attached to, scientists can begin to build a picture of how certain species move through the oceans. So how tags work. A tag has a uniquely coded acoustic signal that emits at the same frequency that would be able to get picked up by the receiver. So kind of like tuning into the radio, you have to be on the right frequency to be able to hear it. Once a tag is close enough to an acoustic receiver to be able to create a positive detection, the receiver stores the date and the time, along with potentially some other incorporated sensors that can be included in a tag to monitor biological or environmental information. Like some of the most common sensors are pressure for determining the depth, temperature and acceleration, as well as predation events. The tag choice is also determined by many factors, including desired battery life and the size of the animal. Typically, a tag should never be more than about 2% of an animal's body weight. You don't want it to change the potential behavior of an animal. And in addition to species that molt, you would select a tag with potentially a shorter tag life because they're going to lose it when they molt. So being mindful of the cyclical effects of an animal's lifestyle. So how the receivers work, acoustic receivers or listening stations that are moored to key locations in the ocean. In this case, the shark is swimming by one that is moored onto the ocean floor, but we can also use pre-existing oceanographic infrastructure like buoys or aquaculture farms. These receivers capture the data on the animal movement when the animal swims within their range of approximately 1 kilometer. The data is collected from the receiver by retrieving the unit, or it can be remotely offloaded using a hydrophone, like in that graphic, that either it's on the seafloor or from a boat. We have an acoustic receiver array that is out of Halifax, which is where the Ocean Tracking Network is located here in Nova Scotia, Canada. And it is the longest acoustic array in the entire world. So I mentioned that one acoustic receiver has the range of approximately 1 kilometer. If you put enough of those together, you are able to create an array. So instead of just having a drop in the ocean, it's more of a line in the ocean. There are 205 kilometers covered from Halifax all the way over to the continental shelf, with about 800 meters spacing between each station, so that we can capture any animals that move past this key area. It's leveraged by many researchers in Nova Scotia and the Atlantic Canadian Maritimes. So anyone that's tagging in the area, their tags are able to be heard on this infrastructure that we maintain. But this does create another problem of what happens when fish leave their study area. They don't always respect the geographical boundaries that we might have. So this is when the Ocean Tracking Network's database comes into play. It's a relational database that's built and hosted on the Ocean Tracking Network hardware out of Dalhousie University. Everybody has the opportunity to register their acoustic tags or acoustic receivers. which all of the tags would get matched to all detections across the database. So if your fish swim outside of your study area, you can find out automatically as long as your tags are registered with the Ocean Tracking Network. It's essentially the entire reason we exist, to connect researchers and support research goals. It would be impossible to map out the entire ocean with these 1 kilometer ranges, but when you have many people doing the same work, then it's very functional. So the types of data that the Ocean Tracking Network database ingests are all based around detection events. So we would require the tagging activity to know where an animal was tagged and the unique code or number that would be associated with the tagged animal. Receiver deployments, so that we can associate the location of a detection event, as well as the detection data. So this is the time and place, as well as any of those additional sensors that we spoke about earlier. So are there limitations to acoustic telemetry? Fish migrate, like we just spoke about, what happens when your fish leaves their designated study area. What if your study that you're looking for doesn't have pre-existing infrastructure in the area that you would like to study? What if there is already pre-existing infrastructure? How could you leverage that? And what about the cost of telemetry? So tags are relatively inexpensive, but the receivers are quite expensive in comparison. So depending on how large a grant or funding might be, it might be difficult to start working within acoustic telemetry. So the Ocean Tracking Network has a loaner program and international network to be able to support our global community. So the loans are issued based on equipment availability and following a successful application and review, which you would be able to find our application form online. This also provides an opportunity for the Ocean Tracking Network to offer assistance with the field or technical capabilities, communications, or the data analysis and support. This provides accessibility within the research community to anyone in the world. So OTN's partners and infrastructure is already pre-existing, like you can see on this map, out there collecting important data on aquatic animals on an international scale across all ocean regions. So over here, kind of in the corner, you can see that, that there are many people that are doing similar work to what we are, and that everything is within the network of the Ocean Tracking Network, so that this information can be leveraged worldwide. So to track, connect, and transform together, the Ocean Tracking Network and its collaborators are tracking oceans, connecting people, and transforming knowledge. So by using the electronic tags for over 270 keystone, commercially important and endangered species, we're able to connect researchers using the infrastructure, the loaner pool that we provide via the application system. Our resources can be offered to researchers, policymakers, industry, and other stakeholders at the local as well as global scales, and transforming our understanding of the oceans by developing global data standards and a paradigm of collaborative research and management. So here's an example of a time that acoustic technology has been used to be able to monitor a marine protected area in the Cocos-Galapagos Swimway. So the Ocean Tracking Network infrastructure supports acoustic monitoring research in between two very important marine protected areas, Cocos Island National Park and the Galapagos Island. This is working in collaboration with Migramar. Migramar is a network that conducts the scientific research needed to better understand and safeguard healthy populations of marine migratory species in the Eastern Pacific. For more than a decade, Migramar has been studying sharks, sea turtles, and other large marine species around Cocos Island National Park and the Galapagos Islands. Endangered leatherback and green turtles and at least 4 species of endangered sharks have been tracked moving between these two marine protected areas along a migration superhighway known as the Cocos-Galapagos Swimway. The migratory route is protected, leaving species vulnerable to fishing gear as soon as they cross outside of the MPA, demonstrating the importance of tracking and understanding the movement of these animals to inform management. So just a couple of numbers to clue up the presentation. We have over 85,000 tagged animals that are tracked by the Ocean Tracking Network, as well as our partners. We have over 1,600 contributors, more than 330 species tracked globally, and 139,000 kilometers that have been covered by our wave gliders that are also a part of the Ocean Tracking Network loaner program. So in summary, the Ocean Tracking Network's equipment loan program has helped researchers around the world track animals in a number of ways. We loan tracking equipment to researchers in order to support the costs of using this technology, to connect researchers through our global database of acoustic animal detections. This is particularly important because it's impossible to cover the entire ocean with equipment all by yourself. So researchers relying on neighboring collaborators to let them know if their fish swims into the neighbor study area. We can facilitate this data sharing and exchange at a global scale so everyone can know where their fish go when they leave the area. And we provide logistical and technical support for grant applications, fieldwork, and data analysis. And there we go. And just a thank you to some of our partners and funders. Thank you so much, everybody. If you have any questions, you can reach out now or after everyone else's presentations.
Thank you very much, Cassandra, for that excellent presentation. I think we'll reserve the questions for the panel discussions. So I'll move on now to our second panelist in the person of Patrick Gorringe. Patrick will be giving us a talk on democratizing ocean observation through low-cost technologies. Patrick is an international ocean relations expert with a strong passion for ocean observation, its observing systems, data, products, services, and networks, and engaging with actors and users together with ample knowledge of European and international ocean data initiatives and programs. He has worked extensively to bring together diverse ocean observing communities in order to enhance cooperation and by this increase the accessibility to marine data, which is one of the challenges that Challenge 9 seeks to address. My question for you at the end of your presentation, one of the questions will be real world challenges that one has faced or people are faced with the implementation of low-cost technologies and how existing best practices helped to address some of these challenges. Thank you very much, and the floor is now yours, Patrick.
Thank you. You see that screen like we should? Everything looks good?
Everything looks good.
Good, then let's go. So I was basically asked to give a presentation on ongoing activities within low-cost sensors, things that are happening, a momentum that's going on. I've been working with this for only looking at it for only a couple of years, but it's really an emerging movement going on. Let's get started, and let's hope that this it's not changing slides. That's not good. That's not a good sign. Let's see. There we are. It's changing for you too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. I just want to start with some figures. EMONet, that is the European Marine Observation and Data Network, they made a study looking at the kind of costs that we put on collecting marine data in Europe. This is for Europe only. So we spend around 1.4 billion euros annually for collecting marine data. It's quite a substantial amount of money. But as I said, there's this movement going on and momentum within low-cost sensors that really could complement these existing observing systems. So I will basically show you some examples just to give you a flavor of what's going on, and with some comments that I have on this as well. So it's really a growing community. And once I started to discover this community, I also thought it was a good idea to try to start to bring them together. Bring the community together by organizing workshops. Maybe some of you have attended these workshops in the past, where we bring together sensor developers, also the users of this kind of data, and show examples of what is out there and what exists. The last workshop we had was in connection with the ocean race, the final of the ocean race in Genoa in June, where we had, I would say we had probably around 35 presentations on new kinds of sensors, new technologies being developed. So I'll show you a couple of examples just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Here is the OpenCTD. This is Andrew Thaler, who has developed the OpenCTD. You can get this as a ready package, or you can buy it as a kind of a Lego that you put together the device yourself. It goes down to about 140 meters depth. We've been checking the quality of this data extensively, and the quality is very, very, very good on this particular device, the OpenCTD. So this is one of them that we are playing around with and currently testing to evaluate the data quality of it. Another one we've been looking at, this is let's see, I didn't jump one, did I? No, I didn't, good. So this is my colleague Fernando, who they have developed a temperature sensor that is both for water and for air temperature. It's a sensor that costs about 25 euros, so roughly $25 US, that provides hourly temperature data. They use it in a project for biodiversity studies and have deployed these sensors all over the Atlantic. So that's both the North, the South Atlantic, East and West. With the help of citizen science, the data that they collect is open, it's fair. You upload the data through a mobile app. It goes straight to the database, and there it is freely available for others to reuse that data. And this is part of what I'm doing. I'm trying to pull all this data together somewhere so we can make some showcases and show the usefulness of this data. Or another example is from something that we have established that we call FVON, Fishing Vessel Ocean Observing Network. This is as simple as using existing fishing vessels as oceanographic platforms, where you deploy sensors on the fishing nets that then go with the ride. So every time the boat is out, you have a sensor on the net, it follows the ride, and it produces data. That looks like that. Here's an example from the northeastern US, a time series from one of these rides where we had a CTD on the fishing net. And similarly here, we have set up a data flow, so everything goes actually in real time. So wherever we have a CTD on a fishing boat in the net that is connected to this network, we get data in real time. The benefit for the fishermen is that they want a temperature profile, which they get directly real time straight into the mobile. So it's really a win-win situation with this one. We're just about to launch this as a Goose emerging network under the Goose OCG. We have some paperwork to finish off there before this will turn into a proper network under Goose. And then as cheap technologies, we connect this to the Ocean Best Practices task team on coastal observations in under-resourced countries. And we are bringing this information and the sensors into under-resourced countries, which just makes perfect sense. And this is exactly what this task team of the Ocean Best Practices is about. The thing is, all these sensors out there, they do produce data. But to make use of that, the data needs to be fair. So it needs to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This was talked a bit in a session yesterday. To make it really useful, to make it, to show it and show the usefulness to the rest of the world with this data. Not everyone can do that immediately, but we are actually there to guide and help in the process, to help people out who are using this kind of technologies, to guide them in the process to make this data much more useful. Because what we want to do is we want to make it accessible, we want to make it visible, we want to make it seen, we want to put them on a map, such as this is just one example of many examples. This is the real-time portal of EMONET physics. Every dot here represents a platform type and is producing data. So we've already been dealing with some of this data and information, and our experience is then that when we reach out to these communities, they generate data, but they don't necessarily share it because they often don't know where to go. They do this for local purposes, but they are not really totally aware of that this is also of interest, this data, for the rest of the world and a much bigger community. So we try to open up that that world for them by helping them out to produce, to get the data on a map such as this one. Data often lacks fairness and machine-to-machine operability. Not often it's real-time data, and they do not necessarily implement an open data policy such as the Creative Commons, the CC BY. A lot of discussions is also about the precision, that a lot of, if you look at like the modeling community, they want very high precision to the data. But I think we just have to start chasing those decimal points and accept that the more, the better, because this is what we can do with this kind of technology. We can produce much more data that might be of slightly less quality, but totally usable anyhow for the scientific community. So what we're trying to do is, and I say we because we're a group of people who are working on this, we're trying to connect this whole community. And we identified some things that we need to deal with. First of all, we need to really understand this landscape. So what kind of technology exists? Who are the users? Where is the biggest impact? We need to get a more acceptance for this kind of technology out there. So we need showcases, we need to prove it, we need the data, and we need to go out and preach about that this is extremely useful. We also need a kind of marketplace. We need a place where you can find information about technology, about providers, where we can set up test beds to try out this kind of equipment and sensors. And we need for a set of best practices and standards to be really available to this community. We're trying to move away from the cheap and the low cost, because that often comes with a little bit of skepticism. That would take some time, but we need those showcases to prove that this is useful. And then we also need to create a communication between the users of this technology and the providers of it. The biggest thing is that currently there's really no, as far as I know, there's no organization taking responsibility or any kind of ownership in doing this, but it's slowly forming now. So then through especially the past year, things are starting to happen. For instance, we have recently been awarded a project in Europe that will kick off in February. The whole idea here is to connect better the land with the ocean community in Sweden. In Europe, sorry, in Europe. And the idea is to close data gaps in the coastal area in Europe. And the idea here is to close these data gaps with the help of low-cost sensors and with citizen science initiatives in a number of regions around in Europe. So we're bringing this in to the European observing system. We're closing gaps using low-cost sensors, reaching out to citizen science groups to help us out. And all the data that will be produced will be fair and will go into this kind of data initiatives such as EMONET or Copernicus or the digital twins of the ocean. We also connected to Coast Predict. We are discussing with other decade projects and programs, such as Sailing for Science is one that we connect well with. The Ocean Best Practice Task Team I mentioned earlier. We have a dedicated project called Community Science under the decade. We're working together with the Coastal Observing Lab in a Box, the CoLab people. Synchro, that is a decade program as well, who is trying to do something similar as we are doing in Europe, but they're doing it in the US. So they had a big workshop over in La Jolla last week, and I attended this one because there was a session on cheap and deep technologies. And what we did there was we made a connection between US and Europe and tried to build this together as a start. So we're trying to look at common things that we can do together as a global community, rather than everyone goes off and tries to build things in their own kind of directions. We also have a number of sessions on the way. If you're interested, please send me an email later on and you can join. We have one coming up pretty soon in France, in Brest, a cost-effective technology for coastal ocean workshop. We have a couple of sessions at Ocean Sciences in the US. We have a session at Oceanology in London. This is under an EOS, which is the European Ocean Observing System Technology Forum. And we plan to have a session at the UN Decade Conference in April next year. So big momentum, a lot of things happening here, and very exciting place to be. That's my email. Please send an email if you have any questions. And that's all for me for now.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It's always exciting to learn about new technologies as far as low-cost observations are concerned. I had a couple of questions in mind for you. You answered most of the questions in the presentation already, but
I have so many
to you.
And when I started looking at this, it was, you know, it was by chance I started to look into this community, and I just got so overwhelmed by everything I start finding, and the willingness to connect and the willingness to share data. So it's taking over a lot of what I'm doing, but it's so exciting. So I just have to do it. But it's growing very, very fast, this community. So there's so much momentum going on now.
Yeah, that's really promising. So we will now move on. Thank you very much again, Patrick.
Thanks a lot.
We will move on to our last panelist in the person of Davidson Mary Frances. She's going to give us some insights on the UN Ocean Decade Capacity Development Facility. Mary is a project coordinator for this capacity development facility. I know from interaction we heard that this is a new facility that has been set up by the Ocean Decade, and so not much has happened in terms of operationalization. But I'm sure Mary has some interesting stuff to tell us about what is going to happen in the future. And with that, the floor is yours, Mary.
Thank you very much, Edem, and thank you to the other presenters as well for really, really interesting presentations. It's amazing to see all the good work that's going on in IOC and the decade, and this particularly in relation to Challenge 9, which I think is so fascinating because it's a cross-cutting issue within the challenges of the decade. We can't deliver the science we want without the capacity that we want. So I think it's really important and pertinent to have this conversation now. And I'll just say I don't have any slides to share, so I'll be relying on my voice. If there's anything that isn't clear, please just put it in the chat and I'll try and keep an eye on it. So as Edem mentioned, the capacity development facility of the Ocean Decade is brand new. So new, it hasn't even had an official launch yet. That will happen in December. But I was brought in with the intention of creating this capacity development facility, which is intended to be a needs-based, evaluative and responsive mechanism within the Ocean Decade that works to support the capacity development needs of actors within the decade, and also to support the involvement of communities that so far are underrepresented within the decade actions. And when we say that, we mean least developed countries, small island developing states, and early career ocean professionals. So the work ahead for the facility falls basically into 4 main components. The first component has to do with needs assessment. And here I need to clarify, because I think that both Patrick and Cassandra were talking a lot about technological capacity, and the facility itself will focus on human capacity. So we're talking about training and workshops and sharing knowledge across all of the decade actions. And when it comes to training needs assessments or capacity needs assessments, it's actually quite enormous, the ocean decade. So the challenge we have ahead of us is to try and pull out existing capacity development assessments that already exist, and do, first of all, a big stock taking exercise, which I hope both this community and other programs that are more familiar with the decade can really help to contribute to. So that stock taking exercise is the very first thing on my agenda, and I'm sure that you'll see my name in your email sometime very soon, asking for needs assessments so we can compile all the good work that's already been done. Then we're going to start sniffing around the decade actions. So as was mentioned before, the decade actions are broken into programs, projects, and contributions. So particularly focusing on the projects and those coordinating the projects, the decade collaboration centers and coordination offices of IOC. We'll be trying to pull from them through focus groups and surveys what they see as the main capacity development priorities. And of course, here comes the fun part after that, and that has to do with matchmaking within the decade. So we know that there are a lot of programs that are providing capacity development, and there's a lot of programs that need capacity development. And so the first exercise will be to try and find those supply demand balances and match them to each other. We'll also be working closely with IOC's capacity development unit at IOD, with the Ocean Teacher Global Academy and other existing ongoing capacity development activities to see what we can drag in and really provide a catalyst for making sure that we're offering responsive capacity development. And then we'll also invent new capacity development initiatives, which should be quite fun. Another thing that I think is of interest to this particular group is that the capacity development facility will be responsible for supporting the community of practice within the ocean decade related to capacity development. And when you ask the question, what are the best practices in capacity development? It's a very challenging question to answer. And I don't think that it's even possible, but it's a good exercise nonetheless. So there is no one size fits all solution, and delivery mechanisms for capacity development interventions are on a vast scale. And when it comes to sharing best practices, this is what I see as, you just have it in the back of your mind. The capacity development facility will be supporting and bolstering this community of practice, where these sort of issues can be discussed in the coming years for the remainder of the decade, we hope. So that's something that I think is really important to keep in mind. Then the final sort of component of our work, moving from needs assessment to delivery of initiatives to supporting this community of practice, the final component of our work is resource mobilization. And I wanted to mention one thing here briefly, and that is that we're sort of already seeing how the capacity development facility can serve the decade via the call for decade actions that's coming out now just this Sunday on the 15th of October. So it was just agreed that this would be a really different sort of call because there's been such an issue with programs led by LDCs and small island developing states. Instead of a request for fully developed programs, this call is more an expression of interest, particularly for those underrepresented groups. And the idea is that through the capacity development facility, there will be a co-design course that's offered to those expressions of interest where we see there's a potential to develop a program. And then after a general co-design course about theory of how you write up a program that could be endorsable, there will be a sort of secondary course on coaching and guiding folks through the development of an actual program that hopefully can be ready by the time 6 months from now when the next call for actions is announced and there is funding on the other side. So one of the biggest barriers that we see to participation from these groups is, they get and maybe have a really good idea, but there's no money for it. And so it's difficult to implement. And so this is one way that capacity development and hopefully the capacity development facility can actually be used to engage communities that haven't had an opportunity to be engaged yet at this level. And so the facility is hopefully going to serve as a sort of platform and a conduit that can plug these really excellent, wonderful solutions. And it's great to hear about these innovative technologies that are being developed and data sharing platforms into the rest of the world that is eager for this kind of support and this kind of infrastructure. So that is my ambition over the next year, my goal, and to really build this capacity development facility up. And I am sure that if we have this conversation a year from now, I will be able to tell you what the best practices I've observed are. For now, what I can say is that's a really big challenge. And my intention in participating in this webinar is particularly to listen, because I think there's a lot of knowledge out there about how to do this work well. And the intention of the facility is to be a responsive mechanism instead of top-down sort of management. So I really look forward to the discussion and questions. I think it will help a lot to have a dialogue later. So with that, I give the floor back. Thank you so much for your attention.
We're up for a challenge, but this is very cool. Pull me in whenever, if you see a kind of link that we can have, then pull me in, and because this is very exciting stuff.
Fantastic. Thanks for the support, Patrick. I know Patrick from my previous job, so this is kind of exciting there is just one more thing that I wanted to mention actually, and that is that I think everybody understands that capacity development is rather important to deliver, as I mentioned, the science we need for the ocean we want. And I've only been on the job for 6 weeks, so I'm still trying to figure out what the decade is, how it functions, and how it all works. And one thing that I can say for sure is that through the investment and the elevation of capacity development by establishing this facility, I think it sends a really strong signal about how important capacity development actually is for the decade to deliver what it's supposed to. And so I'm sensing just through the conversations that I'm having with programs and with coordinators and with the collaboration unit with IOC that this sort of cross-cutting issue of capacity is going to be probably one of the largest impacts that the decade will end up having, and I'm really excited to start running.
That one together with the data. And yeah, that I hear a lot too. Without more ocean data being available on the global scale, the decade will not be the success that we're hoping for.
Right.
So it's there's a couple of, they're turning into strong ones, really strong ones, pushing the decade. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and yeah, you just said it. We need data, but very good data, and of course, data that is accessible by all, and that is all that Challenge 9 is about. That at the end of the day, the decade, we have enough skilled people to even handle the data sets that we produce. People who are able to translate this data into very meaningful. Knowledge and policy. And so that was an excellent presentation from Mary. 2 words that I took from your presentation is co-design and coaching, which gives me the hope that we are on our way to probably coming up with some best practices or guidelines for capacity development as far as you said you are going to focus more on human capacity development, skills development, and all that. And that for me is very promising because we have a lot of programs and projects that are all saying that we are trying to build capacity, but are there any standards that really govern or guide these programs and projects? And the same thing applies to even the census. We have a lot of people coming up with low-cost census, which is also, of course, very timely because when you look at what we currently have as far as ocean observation is concerned, we know that the least powerful nations or the underrepresented nations are not able to afford the advanced technologies. And the only way we can bridge that gap is through adopting this low-cost census, which means that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of trying to streamline the activities and ensuring that there are some guidelines or best practices that they are able to learn from. And so with this, before I come back, I would like to now hand over to Talen. Talen, if you have any questions for
just say what you said now was perfect. I liked every word you said there. Well spoken. Good one.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So Talen, if you have any questions for our presenters, can we do so now?
I absolutely
and
do.
Of course, before Talen comes in, please, the audience, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or in the answers section.
It's easiest to put them in the questions and answers because we can actually see them really clearly and even respond in the chat if we need to.
Yeah, I can say that when I was at this workshop in the US last week and connecting like Europe and the US, we had a couple of things that were like the most important things: produce the best practices for this, connect to the producers, but also think about the language that we use. So we not only consider that we do all this in English, but we have to consider where we're going around the world with it as well. So looking at producing best practices in different languages so it fits all was some of the main messages we had from there.
That's exciting because that is actually one of the challenges or the gaps that we have identified, the language barrier. So that is a good thing that you are already tackling that. I think it would be good to also engage you, Patrick, on our working group to get to learn more about some of the stuff that you're doing, the working group 9.
Yeah, happy to join wherever I can be useful.
Yeah.
It's busy, but it's fun. So that means it's it doesn't feel like work anymore.
All right, Talen.
Absolutely. Well, I'll continue to extend the invite and open the floor. We just heard from 3 lovely presenters. Hope everybody can see my screen there just as a check-in and recap of where we are at right now. we just heard in a few different talks that relate to Challenge 9. As the privilege of co-chair, I will lead the charge in terms of questions, and hopefully others will follow as well. I'm curious, Mary Frances, about your presentation. You mentioned the differences in the requirements between technological capacity development and social capacity development, and I think it's really exciting that this facility seems like it's going to really be a jump in terms of the decade in achieving the social capacity development side. What else do you see is really important for the decade to get right, more, and to put it bluntly, in the next year or so, to facilitate progress towards social capacity development within the decade?
I mean, it's a really good question. And what I can tell already is that, first of all, there's a huge amount of work that's already going on, like presently now going on. And when it comes to the challenge of the next year, I think probably one of the low-hanging fruit, easiest things to do ultimately, will be to connect the work that's already going on in Asia with the work that's going on in West Africa, and the work that's going on in the Caribbean with the work that's going on in the Pacific. So I think it's going to be a huge benefit that I hope will really be a big value proposition to the people involved in the Ocean Decade, that the facility will maintain an overview of all of these different capacity development opportunities that exist. There's been a lot of effort on the side of IOC and the Capacity Development Unit to gather and maintain and present existing capacity development opportunities. The problem is that those opportunities, they come and go really quickly, and it's hard to keep a database fresh with what's happening right now. But my hope is that through the establishment of a community of practice, those who are eager, like for example the ECOPS program, which somebody was just messaging me about now, is one of the most active networks that exists that I've ever seen, of eager young people who want to be involved, who want opportunities, who want exposure and access. And I think at a global level, that program is managed very well. And so I think plugging in what work has already been done and is already sort of has a successful route within the decade into especially those communities that haven't been enough engaged. We can just say they have not, had the opportunity. I think learning from the people who've had success within the decade and trying to mirror that other places could be really, really useful. I'm not sure that totally answered your question, but I think that, there's just a huge amount of stuff going on, and there's a huge amount of opportunity. And my hope is that the capacity development facility can sort of catalyze and elevate some of that work.
Absolutely, thank you. And you mentioned a lot of stuff going on. It sounds like you referenced that we're going to hear a lot about this facility in the next little while. We can all expect a larger announcement soon.
Yeah, well, the official launch of the facility, I think we've almost all of us agreed that it will take place in December. And so, the primary focus of the facility is to assist actors within the decade. So if there's anybody who's outside of the Ocean Decade, it's there's a hope that the facility eventually will bring those actors in, but of course it's sort of we have to start somewhere, and we have this really, really big community of 400 some actions already. So the intention is to launch the facility in December, but ahead of that launch, we're doing this stock taking exercise. So if you see my name in a random email, it's probably because I'm asking you for information about training needs assessments that you may have been involved in or that you know of. And that's the work that's going to happen immediately. And then my hope is that, because undertaking the work of doing a training needs assessment for the world is a little bit big. So I've actually devised a way that I hope to do it at a focus group level within the decade programs. So if you are on this call and you're involved in a program for the decade, you might also see my name asking you for attending a focus group about specific needs that are specific to the Ocean Decade Challenge that your program relates to. So that's you know, yes, you will be hearing more about the capacity development facility in the next year. It's about, you know, technically 6 weeks old. I started in early September. So you can definitely expect a big presence in Barcelona. You can expect a big presence in your inboxes in the coming weeks. Definitely, yeah.
Thank you so much. That's so exciting. Oh, I don't want to clog up all the time. We have a hand raised here online.
Great.
Joanna, if you want to, you have the floor, if you'd like it. If you're speaking, we can't hear you right now. At least I can't.
Maybe
Jose was going to put her in a panel. So I don't see.
While we wait for Joanna, I have a question for Patrick. So with all this, you know, excitement about sensor, low-cost sensor development, I want to find out from you, how are we ensuring that the global south or the underrepresented countries are not only becoming users of these technologies, but we are also encouraging or supporting them to be part of the production process. My question may be, how are we developing their interest in this area of, you know, technology development? We don't want to be left behind in this revolution. So maybe if you can, tell us how you are engaging or trying to develop skills in this area, that would be great.
That's a tough one for someone who's been in here for a short while, but I'm exploring the area. That's for sure what I do. One thing that what we plan to do in this Ocean Best Practices task team that I mentioned a couple of times, we are in there, we're collaborating with a couple of, we can call them low tech groups that are currently developing, but also seeking to develop things even further. We managed to get a little bit of funding there, so we'll be running at least a 1-week workshop in Ghana during 2024, where we not only bring technology there, but also try to encourage them to be part of the whole development of these things. So that could be one way to do it, but I think it's a lot about, I need to find the right channels where I can channel this kind of information and try to inspire people to get in and get on board this movement going. And I'm seeking that, you know, where do I go? Where do we bring this message along? Where can we inspire people to join? I'm looking for that. If you have ideas, then help me out. One way is to, you know, look for that kind of funding to actually go to places, bring things along, try to get people on board to join the development, not only, you know, taking on the existing sensors, but also join the development. But I'm open for any ideas there. That's what I can do at the moment. That's pretty much what I can answer on that one.
Thank you. I see Jay's.
Yeah, that was good. That Jay is there. Hi, Jay. Come on, fill me in. Unmute first.
Unmute first.
Yes, that's the biggest challenge in life, is to unmute.
Yeah, yeah, but there are some small, there are smaller challenges than that.
I wanted to follow up Edem's question because I think it's a very profound one. In the discussions with our colleagues in South Africa and elsewhere, the question was not only bringing sensors and people understanding the technology, but seeing if we can motivate small companies, innovators, to engage so that the sensors themselves are produced locally and the knowledge becomes, if I may use the word, indigenous. And I'm wondering, with the work, Patrick, that you have in your new project and the task teams, whether we're addressing the idea of embedding the whole process, the value chain in the African, and I would say South America, et cetera, because there are many places.
Question or conclusion?
Question to you, my friend.
Well, it was, you pretty much also gave the answer to it, I think. And we and Jay, you've been on this from the very beginning. You know what kind of challenge we're up for here. This is pretty massive. And for now, it's been really trying to understand this whole community and where it is and what we can do with it and the potential with it, which is absolutely massive. I showed a slide of using fishing vessels as oceanographic platforms. So that group have been in contact with a number of countries in both South America and in Africa, and connecting already to local fishermen to try to make this kind of connection. That's not with the data, it's not with the sensor development, it's not with that, but it's more to make connections and then take it step by step. But I mean, I would want to see this as something inspiring companies to get on board. I want to show examples of this kind of low cost technology that you can develop and really try to get people to understand that it's not that complicated. One person I met also in the US last week, that was an amazing meeting, Jay. You missed something there. It was a really, really good one. It was one of the participants who had developed a deep ocean underwater camera. So scaling off everything from these very expensive existing things, only keeping the absolute most necessary components. And it worked perfectly down to very, very deep ocean depths. It's cheap. I don't have a price tag on it, but it's much cheaper than you go and buy something more advanced. This happened some years ago. And a little while ago, she was approached by Discovery Channel, or heard about this, and asked her if she can actually bring that camera along to film a series for Discovery Channel on deep ocean sharks. And that one is out there now, and it's made by a very low technology, a cheap technology. I think that's inspiring enough. So that's these kind of stories. We need these stories to bring people in and to realize that this is doable, and it's not that difficult. Look at the example with the OpenCTD, another one of these that very cheap, easy components, but we need to show that this is it's not that tough, it's not that tricky to do these things, and we try to inspire people to get it. I don't know if that answers your question, Jay, but it was a lot of blah blah around it, but it's but this is how it is. Maybe I have a super clear answer in a year's time, but still exploring. But this is how I would look at it.
Thanks, Patrick. I just had a comment in the chat here from Johanna as well. It says, sorry, Mike is muted. Anyways, I'd just like to share another initiative that was launched this year through the work of the IOC group of experts on capacity development, responding to a request from IOC member states to develop a global database towards an equitable capacity development related to ocean science. Please check out the Ocean CD Hub, and there's a link there, and feel free to enter the CD initiatives and efforts of your organizations. And I think that's actually might be a good segue. I don't want to dampen this discussion at all, because I think we could talk for 4 hours too. But maybe I'll do one last call for questions for our panelists before we move on to a slightly different exercise for the last, is there only 15 minutes left in this meeting? Has it been that fast? Oh my goodness. So maybe 1 or 2 more questions if we have any in the audience for the time being before we move on.
I can give a short comment here, just a short one, because it's, since I think data is important. I think showing that this kind of technologies produce very useful data is important. So we have agreed on to set up one place where we will start ingestion this kind of data into a one spot, so that give us a little while to start populating it with data, but we want it to create this kind of one-stop shop for this data type. This is one of our main goals at the moment. We already have it in place, in principle in place, but I need to get hold of much more data from the community, and then we start populating it. I need this kind of showcases to prove that this is really something good. This is what we're working on.
Thanks, Patrick. A great note. And just a reminder as well, Patrick's email is in the chat, I believe, as well. So please do reach out. We have, okay, one more last question here, and then we'll move on from Bruno in the chat, who says, could you talk a bit about how to democratize access to low-cost projects for the Southern Hemisphere in particular, especially America and Africa? We would benefit greatly from this type of project.
Yeah, but that relates a little bit to the previous one also from Jay. I need a little bit more time. So we're starting to create this kind of momentum going on, and we need to find the right sources so we can start pushing the message across in whatever area across the world, actually. But it's right now it's in a developing phase, so we need a little bit more time before we can really go and aim on especially the like the southern hemisphere.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, folks. Well, we are rapidly nearing the end of the session, but before we do that, we've had a kind of a guided discussion already. We've had some open contributions, but one important outcome that we wanted to get out of this session is capturing the wealth of experience in this room. And part of that hopefully comes with some written responses. And we're going to try and use a bit of technology right now, something called a Jamboard. People have done that before. I just popped the link to it in the chat. A Jamboard is kind of like a collaborative mind map, or a way to get a lot of opinions of people very quickly. So if you want to click on that link, and you should be brought to a page, and that page will have a prompt with a few different boxes in it, and it will say list and discuss the needs for development of methods and best practices for sharing skills, knowledge, and technology across the ocean. So what we're going to do now is we are going to ask all participants if you would like to access this page, and then you can pop on the left-hand side, you should see a panel, and then one of those items on the panel should be something called a sticky note, and you can actually click on the sticky note, which will prompt you to write in a response. Could be just a little sentence, for example, like in response to major needs, gaps, and challenges, you could say Canada, greater access to ocean observing data. And then if you save your sticky note, you should be able to see it, and then you can drag the sticky note to the appropriate box in that response to one of the questions. So what I'd like to do now is just give maybe 2 or 3 minutes if people would like to weigh in on what successful initiatives might apply to your region of the world, what best practices you would recommend, and what are the gaps. And if you can put a little bit of information there, doesn't have to be a whole lot. Like I said, just a sticky note worth, and then minimize your sticky note to be a bit smaller than it currently is, so everybody can fit their comments in there. That would be great. So maybe we'll give about 2 or 3 minutes for everyone to do that. And please pop your some comments in the chat if you cannot access the page.
Will we also share the chat later on? There's some good stuff in that chat. It would be great if I could get some of that.
I hope so.
Normally it's recorded with the session.
Okay, perfect. Good. I've been taking some screenshots here, but the recording will be good.
And I'm already seeing some of the themes that we talked about here today already for best practices, the standardization of low cost sensors, adaptation of best practices with areas of limited infrastructure, things like that, open access databases in particular, all kind of the common themes that we have discussed. That's great to see. As well as training courses. I think I would definitely appreciate that as well. IOC and IOD training courses. I believe Carol's joined us on the call now, but Carol's been tasked with trying to explain a lot of the structure of IOD and whatnot in the last year to me as I've been onboarded as an early career ambassador with OBPS. So I think that there's a lot of great ideas that people are popping in the chat here. Maybe we'll give it another minute or two. Maybe just as some folks enter in the last few sticky notes here, I have a couple questions. If I'm curious, somebody wrote in here the sustainable, in terms of a major need or gap or challenge, somebody wrote in sustainable innovation with rapid workforce development with quality training. If that person's comfortable with it, I'm curious to ask in what context. I'm curious if they want to expand on what that means. If not, it's perfectly reasonable as well. Oh, yeah. I also see for major need gap challenge, OBPS or a Goose endorsement. Really? And successful initiatives. I'm sorry somebody's explained this already in this session, but glider best practices. What's a glider best practice?
Jay, wouldn't that exist already? Glider best practices?
Well, yeah, it's saying successful initiatives, but I'm just curious. I'm kind of in the dark on what a glider best practice is.
Okay, so the glider community globally didn't have standards and best practices for collection and validation and testing of instruments. And the European glider group GROOM produced under EuroC a number of very, very good best practices, which are now being widely accepted. So it's a good example of what a working group coming together can do for both the local and the global community.
That is actually something that the Ocean Tracking Network and our glider group has been familiarized with in recent times. We have 4.5. Unfortunately, there was an incident with a hurricane in one of our wave gliders. So we have 4.5 wave gliders and 7 slocum gliders that we operate basically on a 24-hour basis from April until October, and then we run out of daylight. So, but those are best practices that we are familiar with and that are highly functional. And I would absolutely include them in the list of successful initiatives.
Amazing.
I have a comment. I see a sticker about good practices and standards, and also as it's very small best practices. I think there is a causality there. I mean, a standard is above best practice. Best practices which are adopted and endorsed are a potential candidate for being standards. Not the other way around. A standard is de facto is kind of a best practice because it's endorsed by a very large community.
Noted. Well, I'll leave this open here in case anybody has any last sticky notes they want to add here. But thank you, folks. This is so helpful, and I'm sure this will be captured, and I imagine this could be potentially provided with a live recording of this session to participants if they would like. Does anybody have anything they want to pick out, and either the panelists or other folks, about anything they're seeing on these sheets right here? Because we've had a couple cool points already.
I can just comment on one of them there. The Canada, the one way up there, Canada greater access to ocean observing data, right? That's what it says.
Yes.
Because I know there's a big project going on in Canada to actually pull together observing capacity in Canada to make more data accessible there.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yes.
the only comment I have there. So I know there's a lot of work on that.
There is. That was my comment, so I can speak to that a little bit too.
Okay.
We do have a couple of largely federal organizations, Ocean Networks Canada and Department of Fisheries and Oceans, working on some projects right now. I suppose as somebody in this space, some of the main challenges for my research have been precedent for open access biodiversity data, specifically pelagic in the area that I'm working in the Northeast Pacific. And so it's not so much the data don't exist, at least but it's the accessibility of said data that I've personally found challenging in my neck of the woods, as it seems like it is a theme as well. Hence why there are so many international collaborations to help to address that. But yeah,
this is a common thing. So I'm based in Sweden, and everyone's assuming that we are super well organized. All Swedish data reaches out to the global community, but that's not really the case. There's so much data still that we need to ingest into our national oceanographic data portal. So it's sometimes you think that you're really producing a lot is produced, but far from all is shared. So it's a lot of knocking on doors.
I bet it is. Thank you.
I see that Carol has her hand up.
Yeah.
Yes, Carol.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for being late, but I'm happy to see all the great discussions. I just wanted to highlight one point here that I see in the Jamboard is that so we tend to focus a lot of our conversations on best practices in data and sharing best practices about the systems, but it's hard to put the community to focus on best practices on sharing skills and knowledge and technology. And we often go we bounce because most of us are scientists and we are not trained to be able to teach someone how to share. We don't even know so good, how to do that and to really map those practices in capacity development. So I would like to hear from some of my colleagues if you could point out tips about that or sources about this. For instance, what would be a best practice to share a technology, and what would you point out is one best practice to share knowledge? In terms of OTJ, we see that using e-learning is a good practice, is a best practice, but I would like to hear from everyone. Thank you.
Thanks to COVID, which I don't think too many people get the opportunity to say, but it does open up opportunities for like platforms like this, where many people from all over the world are able to come together. And there was an initiative that was started with the Ocean Tracking Network because of the limitation of early career researchers, whom often can use the loaner pool of telemetry equipment that we have. once they have their equipment and have their data, the whole concept of networking and really being able to discuss your data with other early career researchers or people that have been in the field for a longer period of time was extremely restricted. So we essentially created something that we deem a study hall. And every Thursday, regardless of any type of questions that you might have regarding telemetry, whether it's your data ingestion or the actual deployment and tagging of animals for the tracking, there would be a collective group of people from all over the world that you came with any questions that you might have. And it was about 2.5 hours on Thursday afternoons, and some really great connections have been made through there. So that's a way that we tried to promote sharing, especially in a time where that seemed so restrictive from 2020 through 2022.
So Cassandra, I'm happy that you shared that, because what we see is that connections between people are one of the best practices that we can support in terms of sharing skills, knowledge, and technology. So that's why, like we always say, e-learning, because this is one step, but it's very important in the long term. So for instance, providing resources to internships, to meetings where people do this exchange between professionals, it tends to have a result in the long term. And I really hope the community, like the IUC, can get also together to organize, to provide a higher support also for this meeting, you know, because people are so busy nowadays and hardly everyone have time. But if you have someone next to you, the intense time is very effective in terms of, for instance, sharing your knowledge, sometimes even better than a person watching a 10-hour talk of someone in the other side of the world or recording. So I hope we can do that within the decade. Also, Mary Frances touched on coaching. I think it's something we don't do a lot in the ocean community. So like, have tutoring, really using those skills. We are really behind on other areas, and yeah, hopefully we can do small steps on that too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Carol.
you
I
very
just wanted to say, sorry, Edem, I just wanted to say really quickly that I agree. And I think that, the idea, because we were talking about how do you share? How do you build skills in sharing? And I think human connection is very important for this. And even moreover, this idea of working together to solve a problem that might not be in your backyard, but is, far away, can actually be really rewarding intellectually and also just at a human level as well. So I think that's a really good intention to start out. And I'll be quiet.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Anna, for coming in. Anna was supposed to co-chair with me, but she had to attend another meeting, and so she asked Talen to represent her. Thank you so much. And one thing that I also want to raise here is that sometimes we should also take capacity development, especially trainings, to where it's needed. We should host them in the sites where it's needed. It's better to learn with what you have than to go and train outside or in an advanced country with all the technologies, and then you come back and you are not able to implement what you have done. One model that we have been using is the Coastal Ocean Environment Summer School in Ghana and Nigeria, which has been running since 2016. So what we do is we bring instructors from developed countries to come and work together with instructors in less developed countries, and offer the training in the developing countries where students or participants are able to use the facilities that we have, go on the field, do real-time things that really relate to the problems and the challenges that they are trying to address. And I think that is one thing that we need to include, especially Mary, if you are going to look at, coming up with some best practices for capacity development, maybe that is one of the areas that you should be considering. I don't know if we still have more time. It's 4 minutes past 3. I don't know how we are doing with time, René.
I think we are over, aren't we?
We are over
by 4 minutes.
We are over by 4 minutes. So
we're having fun, so it doesn't matter.
But we're having fun.
Yeah.
That means
I just wanted to say
an interesting session. So Talen, if you have
there's just a really interesting message in the chat about maybe it would be easier to do bad practices. I take that point. I think all of us can imagine the type of bad practices that we want to avoid. It might be easier to go that way than the other.
Be a very long list. We could just fill the whole time if we wanted to. Probably.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
All right, over to you, Talen.
Okay.
Closing remarks.
We had a suggestion from Jay to put up the video on so that he can take a shot of the screen, including himself, because I see only his name.
And while we do that, I just wanted to thank everyone again for their contributions to the Jamboard. It really is helpful to provide outcomes for this meeting in writing, as well as the chat and the live video. So thank you all again. And I'm sure that can be made to be available to participants as well, I'm assuming, René?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think so. I mean, I have to ask Jose because, or Katarina, because they are the one behind, and they can say, but I'm pretty sure that yes, we can, because it was on the screen. It was on your screen, so that was captured by the recording. Now, what is on the website is a bit different. So if you keep it somewhere on the website, then it will be shared. If not, it's I mean, we have the link in the chat, but then if it is not kept on the website, then it disappears. So it's up to you, Talen, to save it on your side.
Okay.
The Jamboard. The Jamboard. I mean, you have to save.
I can do that. It's not mine, but I can definitely do that. If we want to take the photo, I guess we could do that as well with all the participants too. But I guess while we do that, thank you. Just want to say thank you to all our panelists, everybody who contributed to the discussion today. I found it personally really enlightening and really interesting to see all of the great work that's being done, not only with regards to best practices, but the Ocean Decade and ocean observing practices overall. So just thank you all again so much.
Thank you, and thanks from the workshop organizers, and not only myself. I mean, you see my picture, but we had Cora and Pauline in the background. Of course, we had Jose and Katarina. This time I say it correctly, Katarina, and and Jay as well. I mean, hi, Katarina. And that is the last session of the workshop again. So it's a closing workshop written somewhere in a program. But we have another week of focus session. The links were in the chat somewhere, and I do not hesitate to ask us for the link. So it was a great week. I mean, so many information. Patrick, I think you were talking about getting more data. So sometimes I feel overwhelmed by data, too many data, thousands of emails, so on. I mean, but that's not exactly the same kind of data. So anyway, thanks a lot for today, panelists. I mean, this session panelists, the attendees as well. Some of them asking having very sharp comments, and thanks. I mean, they are not in yet now, but thanks for all the one participating in this workshop. I mean, Jose told me that, and Katarina, that we had something like 400 more attendees. Not everyone on Zoom, because we had also the YouTube attendees. So and something like 80 plus different countries in the world. So I think that we are spread all around, and I think that Cassandra said that that was thanks to COVID, maybe, but anyway, we were able to have 80 plus countries at the same time in the same place almost. So that's okay.
Very impressive.
An achievement. Well, you know, it's like bad and good practices. It's the good side and the bad side of COVID. So just think about the good side.
René, can everybody wave and smile, and I'll take a picture? Okay, guys. Thank you. It's good.
That was good, huh?
Okay. Yeah, I hope so.